All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into the story of Noah's Ark.
Definitely a classic.
Right. You'd think by now we'd have heard it all, right? The boat, the animals, all that rain. But there's a lot more to uncover here than you might think. We're taking a deep dive into Genesis 6 today, and trust me, there are some seriously interesting details hiding in plain sight.
Oh, absolutely. This story, it gets simplified a lot, especially when you're telling it to, kids. But when you really get into the text itself, it's amazing all the different themes and questions that it brings up.
Right. Like, we all know the world was kind of a mess before the flood, hence the whole, God hitting the reset button thing.
Right.
But Genesis 6 doesn't just say everyone was being bad. It uses this very specific word, wickedness.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes it so interesting. What does that actually mean, The text doesn't come out and define wickedness. Was it violence? Corruption? Maybe just completely ignoring, like divine law. That lack of specifics really makes you think about what good and evil even mean, even on a huge scale like this.
Yeah, like how bad do things have to get to justify a flood of biblical proportions, right? And that's just the start. Genesis 6.2 throws us a curveball right off the bat. The sons of God took wives from the daughters of men. Now, hold on. Who are these sons of God?
Yeah, that little phrase has been sparking debate for centuries. A lot of people think it's talking about fallen angels, and you see that interpretation a lot in the footnotes.
Fallen angels. Okay, now that's a twist. It's not just humanity messing up. We've got otherworldly beings mixed up in all this, which, that just raises even more questions.
Totally. Like, what's their whole deal? What are they doing here? Are they angels who rebelled? Are they something else entirely? The text kind of leaves us hanging.
And if that wasn't enough, then you've got the Nephilim in verse 4. It's like the text just casually drops them in there. Oh, yeah, and there were giants walking around, too.
Well, the word Nephilim itself has to do with falling, and some scholars think these were, actual giants, while others say, no, they were more like demigods, the offspring of those sons of God and human women.
Giants. Demigods. Talk about a wild time to be alive, right?
Right.
But we're still left wondering, what was their role in all of this? Were they the result of angelic shenanigans or something else? It's crazy how much Genesis 6 leaves up for interpretation.
It really is. And
Yeah.
I don't think that ambiguity is an accident. It makes us engage the text, wrestle with it.
Oh, we're going to wrestle, right? But before we do, we've got to talk about what it says in verse 6. This isn't just God making some cold, calculated judgment. It says he was sorry and grieved by what humanity was doing.
It's powerful, isn't it? Challenges the idea of a God who's distant and unfeeling. The language here is so raw. God is grieved in his heart, like it's a deeply personal kind of sorrow.
It's as if God is feeling the weight of humanity's choices right alongside creation. And then in verse 3, God says his spirit won't strive with humanity forever and sets a kind of deadline, 120 years.
Chilling thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder, what did those 120 years represent? Was it a time for repentance, a last chance?
And why 120 years? What's the significance of that number?
It doesn't say. It's another one of those details that just adds more mystery to the story and makes us dig deeper for meaning. Almost like a countdown, right? But then in the middle of all this talk about judgment, we're introduced to this guy, Noah. And he's not just some random boat builder. Genesis 6.9 calls him just and perfect in his generations.
Yeah, not exactly your average Joe, right? What makes Noah so special? What do those words even mean in this context?
Well, just usually means someone who's righteous, someone trying to live according to God's will. But it's the perfect in his generations part that's really interesting.
Oh, I needed help with that one. The footnote said perfect could also be translated as blameless or having integrity.
Right, exactly. And that idea of integrity is so important here. It's like Noah wasn't just going through the motions of his faith. He was really living it out, especially in a time when, according to the text, everybody else was super corrupt.
And that makes me think about how Genesis 6 says Noah walked with God.
And that paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it? This close personal relationship, like an ongoing conversation. It's not just about avoiding bad stuff. It's about actively seeking a connection with the divine. And it's that relationship, that integrity, that leads God to choose Noah for this very specific task.
Yeah, to build an ark. And not just any ark, right? God gives him insanely detailed instructions, dimensions, what kind of wood to use, even specific compartments. It's all there in Genesis 6.1416. What's the deal with all the specifics?
I think it does a few things. For one, it makes the story feel real, tangible. We're given measurements in cubits, which is a unit of length based on a person's forearm. It reminds us that this ark, even though it was huge, was still something built by a human.
Footnote said a cubit is like 18 inches long, which really helps put it in perspective.
Right. Imagine the sheer scale of this project. And I think those precise measurements also emphasize how serious the situation was. God's giving Noah this huge responsibility. It's saving life on Earth. He's not leaving anything to chance.
It wasn't just about keeping Noah and his family safe either. All those decks, compartments, it's like God was designing some kind of ancient floating zoo.
Exactly. This wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about saving the diversity of life itself. All those carefully built compartments show us how much God valued creation, how much he wanted it to survive, even in the face of judgment.
It really is amazing when you think about it. All those animals, big and small, finding safety in this incredible ark. It's a powerful image, this idea of preservation right in the middle of total destruction.
It is. And I think it makes us look beyond the surface of this story. So often we think about Noah's Ark and all we picture is that flood, the world being punished for its wickedness. But that's not the whole story, is it?
Right.
You could say this story is actually about new beginnings.
Yeah.
The fact that life finds a way, It's about hope.
Yeah, it's like even in judgment, there's this unwavering sense of mercy that runs through it all.
Absolutely. That kind of duality, that balance of justice and mercy, it's something you see throughout the Bible, really. Makes you think about how those themes play out in our own lives. How do we reconcile these seemingly opposite ideas? How do we offer grace even when we see wrongdoing?
Lots to think about, for sure. I have to say, when I started digging into Genesis 6, I thought I knew what to expect. Thought it was a pretty simple story, to be honest. But as we've seen today, it's anything but. Every verse, every detail, it's like it opens up a whole world of meaning and interpretation.
That's what's so great about these ancient texts, isn't it? They don't give us all the answers. Instead, they invite us to have this conversation, a search for understanding that goes beyond our time and place.
We've talked about good and evil, those mysterious fallen angels and giants, God's grief, the incredible design of the ark, all in just a few short chapters.
And like you said, we've barely scratched the surface. Genesis 6, like so much of the Bible, really shows us the complexity of what it means to be human and the power of these stories to shape how we see the world and ourselves.
It reminds us that some of the most important truths are right there in front of us, just waiting to be discovered and explored by each new generation. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Noah's Ark, it makes me wonder, if a story like this that we think we know so well can have so much depth, what other wisdom and insight are we missing out on?
It's definitely something to think about as we face the challenges and triumphs in our own lives, right?
Absolutely, something to think about.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Toby, Eleanor, and our team of researchers are working hard to produce more episodes. If you value what we're doing here, please consider subscribing and sharing the word. Additionally, our podcast, RSS, and Patreon links can be found below. Listener support is what makes our work possible. Join us next time for another deep dive. God bless.